She was the girl with the golden voice, a polished image, powerhouse vocals, and a record deal that turned heads in the mid-1990s R&B scene. But behind the Billboard hits, whispers spread. By 1995, insiders in New York and LA questioned who was really pulling the strings.
Deborah Cox. I see that she's headlining, theater, and she really has a fabulous voice. Maybe because she was the artist that I concentrated on after Whitney.
Was it all talent or something more transactional? Rumors of secret meetings with Clive Davis and career-making deals hinted at a steeper price. This is the untold story of what Deborah Cox may have traded to reach the top. Born in Toronto, Canada in July 1974, Deborah Cox was raised in a Guyanese-Canadian household that valued both discipline and artistic expression. Music was woven into the fabric of her upbringing. She began singing in church choirs at the age of 6 and was soon performing at community events, school functions, and local talent shows. Her earliest influences included legends like Whitney Houston, Aretha Franklin, and Gladys Knight, shaping her vocal style with a mix of gospel depth and soulful power. By her early teens, Cox was already building a local reputation, booking gigs around Toronto and landing small roles in commercials. Determined to make it in the music industry, she spent countless hours in recording studios, creating demos and knocking on the doors of record labels, many of which turned her away. Still, she persisted. Her voice, a rare blend of clarity and emotion, stood out even when the opportunities didn't come easily.
I didn't know you were a backup singer for Celine Dion starting out.
Ah, you didn't? Well, yeah, I did a year with her, and we did a lot of shows.
Her first major break came in the early 1990s, when she was hired as a backup singer for Celine Dion. The job not only took her to bigger stages across Canada and the US, but also placed her in the orbit of key industry players. Her professionalism, stage presence, and unmistakable vocal range didn't go unnoticed. Executives and producers began whispering about the girl behind Celine Dion, who might just have the chops to become a star in her own right. But the real turning point came when Clive Davis, legendary music mogul and then president of ARISTA Records, took notice. Known for launching the careers of Whitney Houston, Alicia Keys, and countless others, Davis had an eye for talent and a reputation for molding stars. In 1995, he signed Cox to ARISTA and took her under his wing. It was a pivotal moment that would change the trajectory of her career and her life. Soon after, Cox released her self-titled debut album. Backed by a major label and Davis's promotional machine, the album generated buzz with singles like Sentimental and Who Do You Love. Almost overnight, she transformed from an anonymous background vocalist to a rising solo star. Her sudden ascent raised questions behind closed doors. To some in the industry, the speed and scale of her success seemed uncanny. There were murmurs, especially from artists who had spent years grinding without major breakthroughs. How did she, relatively unknown and with no major hits under her belt, secure such a powerful advocate in Clive Davis? Why was he, known for being highly selective, suddenly so committed to pushing Deborah Cox to the forefront? The transition from obscurity to stardom was unusually smooth. The media portrayed her as a Cinderella story, but industry veterans weren't so easily convinced. Whispers began circulating around studios and industry mixers in New York and Los Angeles. Some credited her undeniable talent. Others speculated there had to be more to the story, more behind the scenes that the public wasn't being told. Was Clive Davis simply investing in the next great voice? Or was there a more personal connection driving his unwavering support? Clive Davis was not just another record executive. He was a legendary figure in the music industry, often credited as the mastermind behind some of the most iconic careers in pop and R&B history. From Whitney Houston to Alicia Keys, Barry Manilow to Janis Joplin, Davis had a well-earned reputation for discovering raw talent and transforming it into global stardom. His influence ran deep, and his track record spoke volumes. Artists who entered his orbit often emerged as household names. He was known for his meticulous attention to detail, his strategic genius, and his almost prophetic instinct for hit-making. So when Clive Davis took Deborah Cox under his wing, it wasn't just a routine signing. It was a deliberate investment, and the industry took notice. Almost immediately, comparisons to Whitney Houston surfaced. The media latched onto it, fans speculated, and insiders began watching closely. Like Houston, Cox was a powerful vocalist with a clean-cut image and an air of untapped greatness. And just like Whitney, she had Clive Davis at the helm.
Look, we broke the all-time record with Deborah. Nobody's supposed to be here. Number one, 14 straight weeks at R&B radio. She certainly has had success, but she never reached the peak that of Whitney Houston, and so, of course, really no one else has.
Davis was said to be heavily involved in Cox's development. He wasn't merely approving tracks from a distance. He was actively shaping her sound, selecting producers, approving songs, and even advising on visual presentation. Reports from the time indicated that he gave personal attention to her vocal arrangements, song selection, and public image. Her wardrobe, branding, and even the tone of her interviews reflected the careful construction of a star in the making. At first glance, this level of involvement could be seen as nothing more than a seasoned mogul guiding a promising artist. But in a business where most newcomers struggle to secure even a fraction of such support, the preferential treatment Cox received was hard to ignore. She appeared in top-tier magazines, secured prime radio slots, and was nominated for major awards shortly after her debut. These were milestones that typically required years of industry maneuvering, yet Deborah seemed to achieve them with remarkable ease. The praise Davis gave her in public only added fuel to the speculation. He called her one of the greatest voices of her generation, sometimes even hinting that she was destined to follow in Whitney's footsteps. His admiration was obvious, and his advocacy of her talent was unusually vocal. He positioned her at the center of major label initiatives, and promotional campaigns rolled out for her with a force usually reserved for artists with multiple platinum albums under their belts. This rapid ascent, paired with Davis's deeply personal investment, began to raise eyebrows among other artists and executives. In an industry known for gatekeeping, limited access, and cutthroat competition, it was rare to see someone bypass the usual struggle. Many began to ask questions behind closed doors. Why was Clive so devoted to Deborah Cox? What made her different from the countless others vying for his attention? And most notably, was their relationship purely professional? The rumors did not stop at industry politics. Whispers of a closer, more private bond between Cox and Davis began circulating in recording studios, hotel lobbies, and backstage green rooms. Some speculated that the mentorship was more intimate than it appeared on the surface. Others believed there may have been unspoken agreements or behind-the-scenes dealings that facilitated her rapid climb. There was no hard evidence, just murmurs, nods, and knowing glances exchanged between those who had seen the industry's underbelly up close. While Davis's of artists was nothing new, his intensity with Cox felt different to some. The attention, the resources, and the fast-tracked opportunities she received all contributed to a growing perception that her rise was not entirely organic. People wondered if a hidden dynamic was at play, something more than mentorship and professional ambition. The music industry has long been a place where power, influence, and personal relationships intersect in complex ways. Deborah Cox's journey to stardom, with Clive Davis as her most visible champion, fit that mold a little too perfectly. As her career soared, so did the questions. Was her success a reflection of pure talent and timing, or was it shaped by sacrifices and strategic alliances that the public was never meant to see? The comparisons between Deborah Cox and Whitney Houston were never just about their vocal range or performance style. They ran much deeper, drawing attention to the striking similarities in how both women were introduced, marketed, and managed within the music industry. Both were discovered and signed by Clive Davis, one of the most powerful executives in the business. Both were launched into the spotlight under his meticulous guidance, and both were promoted using eerily similar language, with heavy emphasis on their pure voices, elegant presence, and ability to cross over into mainstream pop without losing their R&B roots. Almost immediately after Cox signed with ARISTA Records, industry insiders and observers began noting these parallels. It seemed intentional. The way Cox was positioned in media interviews, the styling of her album covers, and even the emotional ballads chosen for her debut echoed Houston's early rollout in the 1980s. It was as if a blueprint was being reused, step by step. Clive Davis had already built one global superstar from the ground up, and now he appeared to be orchestrating another. But unlike the first time, people were watching closely and questioning his motives. Some began to whisper that Deborah Cox was not just being developed into an artist, but that she was being as Whitney Houston's replacement. By the mid-1990s, Houston's career, though still active, was showing signs of strain under the weight of public scrutiny, personal challenges, and intense media speculation. Rumors of drug use and marital issues plagued her image. For a mogul like Davis, whose business depended on consistency and marketability, the idea of having a new, drama-free version of Whitney waiting in the wings made strategic sense. But the more closely Cox's career mimicked Houston's, the more suspicion it stirred. Industry veterans began asking whether this was truly about finding the next great voice, or whether it was about replicating a formula for success with someone more controllable, more compliant. Critics questioned whether Cox was being celebrated for her own unique artistry, or whether she was being molded into someone else's legacy.
I didn't mind the comparisons
because you were found or discovered by Clive too.
By Clive Davis, yeah. He was the executive producer of our albums. I mean, he was involved in almost every facet of my career.
The comparisons didn't stop at their careers. Behind the scenes, rumors swirled around the nature of both artists' relationships with Clive Davis. With Whitney, there had always been speculation, whispers of a deeper, more complex bond that blurred the lines between mentorship and manipulation. Though those rumors were never publicly confirmed, they lingered in the background for years, surfacing again every time Houston's name was mentioned alongside Davis's. When similar rumors began to follow Deborah Cox, many saw them as part of a troubling pattern. The level of control Davis was said to have exerted over both women's careers went beyond the norm, even for someone of his stature. From song choices to image management, every detail was reportedly filtered through his approval. Some insiders claimed that Davis operated less like a record executive and more like a puppeteer, pulling the strings behind the curtain while carefully crafting public narratives. For Cox, this narrative was both a blessing and a curse. On one hand, she had the support of one of the most powerful figures in music, which gave her opportunities few others could dream of. On the other, she was constantly being viewed through the lens of another woman's story, unable to fully step out of the shadow cast by the icon who came before her. And the more she succeeded, the more people speculated that her rise might have involved compromises that were never discussed in the open. Over time, these comparisons and rumors began to take on a life of their own. In private industry circles, people pointed to the recurring dynamics: a young, beautiful, talented black woman, a powerful older white executive, a rapid rise backed by unusually strong support, and always the same questions: how close was the relationship, how much influence was exerted, and what might have been exchanged behind the scenes in order to secure fame. Though no hard evidence ever surfaced, the whispers never fully disappeared. The parallel paths of Whitney Houston and Deborah Cox remained a topic of speculation, especially among those who had seen how the entertainment industry operated behind closed doors. The line between mentorship and control, between guidance and possession, remained blurred in both stories. And for many, it was this murky space that gave rise to the most uncomfortable questions of all questions that continue to follow Deborah Cox's legacy to this day. adding to the mystery of Deborah Cox's early rise were persistent rumors that she may have shared private relationships with powerful R&B figures, potentially influencing her visibility during her formative years. Though never confirmed, these whispers followed her through studios and industry circles.
Were you a fan of his before, in the years before all this
I
came
went on
out?
tour with it, yeah.
Oh,
You were on tour with R. Kelly?
Yeah.
Really?
One name that surfaced often was R. Kelly. At the peak of his influence in the mid-1990s, he was known for shaping the careers of female artists. Cox and Kelly reportedly crossed paths frequently at award shows and studio sessions, prompting speculation about a discreet alliance that may have helped her reach new audiences. Usher's name also emerged in gossip. Both were rising stars in the 1990s, appearing at the same events and sometimes mentioned in interviews together. Their chemistry during tours and offstage encounters fueled talk of a close connection, one some believed helped Cox break into more male-dominated spaces. Genuine, another R&B heavyweight, was spotted with Cox during tour appearances, leading to talk of a possible short-lived romance. Some suggested their professional rapport gave Cox access to younger fans and key tour lineups during her climb. Perhaps most surprising was the quiet link to Luther Vandross. While no romantic involvement was ever suggested, Vandross was known for mentoring young talent. He reportedly took a supportive role in Cox's career, publicly praising her and inviting her to perform at select events. The lack of clear detail around their closeness left space for speculation. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, these unconfirmed associations added a layer of intrigue to Cox's story. Her silence on the matter only deepened the curiosity. In an industry where image often blurs with truth, these rumors became part of her legacy, leaving some to wonder whether her rise was based solely on talent or helped along by hidden alliances. As Deborah Cox's star continued to rise in the late 1990s, the narrative around her success began to split. On one side were fans and critics praising her stunning vocal control and emotional ballads. On the other, a growing number of industry insiders suggested her ascent wasn't entirely organic. Whispers of favoritism began to circulate, raising questions about how Cox was receiving such high visibility compared to other equally talented newcomers.
Deborah Cox. I see that she's headlining, theater, and she really has a fabulous voice. Maybe because she was the artist that I concentrated on after Whitney.
Her 1995 debut album achieved gold certification, a notable feat for a new R&B artist. But it wasn't just the sales that caught attention. It was the exposure. Cox appeared on high-profile TV shows, in major magazines, and landed endorsements and performance slots typically reserved for more established acts. Her presence was amplified in ways her chart numbers didn't fully explain. Speculation intensified with the release of One Wish in 1998. The lead single, Nobody's Supposed to Be Here, became a breakout hit, spending 14 consecutive weeks at #1 on the Billboard R&B chart, a record at the time. But the success was paired with an aggressive, unusually robust promotional campaign. The song dominated radio and TV, and Cox appeared on nearly every major platform. For many industry watchers, the scale and speed of this push raised eyebrows. Such marketing strength was usually reserved for a label's top-tier artists or those with deep financial backers. Some questioned whether Cox's visibility was due solely to Clive Davis's belief in her, or if there was something more personal guiding her path. Clive Davis, known for championing select artists, was also infamous for playing favorites. Critics claimed Cox received preferential treatment at ARISTA Records, treatment not afforded to others on the label. Some music journalists and programmers noted that Cox was landing radio airplay, TV spots, and brand deals that didn't seem to match her album sales or touring footprint. Her frequency at award shows also drew attention. A few voices in the industry dared to say what others only whispered, that Cox may have benefited from private relationships with influential men. Davis, in particular, was central to these conversations. Observers pointed to his personal involvement in her image and promotion, suggesting their dynamic went beyond the typical artist-label relationship. There was never concrete proof, but in an industry driven by access and image, even rumor could shape perception. For Cox, the idea that her rise was helped along by powerful connections followed her throughout her peak years. While her talent wasn't questioned, some dismissed her success as something orchestrated behind closed doors rather than earned on stage. To her credit, Cox never addressed these rumors publicly. She remained focused on her craft, redirecting interviews toward her music and staying silent on personal matters. Her team also declined to engage in speculation. For some, her silence was seen as professionalism. For others, it added to the mystery. Regardless, the commentary lingered. Deborah Cox's journey became both a symbol of triumph and a topic of quiet controversy. In a business where perception can outweigh truth, her rise served as both an inspiration and a cautionary tale, where talent, timing, and whispered alliances all seemed part of the equation. One of the most telling aspects of Deborah Cox's public image was her silence. While other artists were open about their personal relationships or seen with partners at events, Cox remained enigmatic. She kept her private life out of the public eye, especially during the height of her fame. During the late 90s and early 2000s, she was rarely photographed with partners, and she gave few, if any, interviews discussing her romantic life. In an industry where relationships often drive headlines, Cox's discretion stood out. While this could be interpreted as professionalism or a desire for personal boundaries, many took it as confirmation that there was something to hide, perhaps an affair with a powerful executive or a secret relationship with another artist. This absence of transparency left a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the industry and the tabloids created their own narrative.
And literally went right into the studio to record The Greatest Love of All.
Wow.
And all the songs had already been chosen, so I basically lent my voice and tried to recapture the essence of Whitney Houston.
You did your thing.
Thank you.
In 2015, a new controversy brought Deborah Cox back into the spotlight, this time over the Lifetime Whitney Houston biopic. Cox had been chosen to re-record Houston's vocals for the film. While some praised her performance, the project itself was widely criticized, especially by Houston's family. Cissy Houston, Whitney's mother, publicly disapproved of the movie. Fans questioned whether it was appropriate for Cox to step into such a sacred musical space. Though Cox defended her involvement, stating that her intention was to honor Whitney's legacy, the backlash exposed deep tensions both within the fan base and the industry. Many critics argued that if Cox was truly that close to Whitney, she wouldn't have participated without the family's blessing. Others felt that her participation was a sign of ego, an attempt to position herself as Houston's natural successor. Regardless of her intent, the controversy reinforced the idea that Cox's career had long been shaped by associations with more prominent figures, Clive Davis, Whitney Houston, and that these associations carried a cost. One of the most revealing episodes in Deborah Cox's story came when she left ARISTA Records. At the time, she disclosed that she had hidden her pregnancy for 6 months out of fear that it would affect her contract. This admission painted a stark picture of the pressures female artists face. In a cutthroat industry where image and availability are currency, Cox had felt she couldn't be both a mother and a star. Ultimately, she chose to walk away from the label. Her decision revealed the cost of success, not just in rumors and suspicion, but in real-life sacrifices. It also hinted at the control labels had over women's lives, both professionally and personally. While some praised her bravery, others saw the move as a retreat from an industry that had been carefully built around her. Her exit from ARISTA marked the end of an era, the era defined by Clive Davis, speculation, and a meteoric rise that still confounds many.
I can't tell you how many #1 spots she's shared. She's had on the Billboard dance charts, and she's gone on to sell millions of records. And you know, you can see her on the screen, or you can see her on Broadway, and she's always been stellar.
Despite the controversy, Deborah Cox has endured. She's released multiple albums, won a Juno Award, starred in Broadway productions, and performed globally. Her voice remains one of the most respected in modern R&B, but the rumors never fully disappeared. Her name still circulates in lists of artists who allegedly cheated their way to the top. And the Clive Davis connection continues to cast a long shadow. It's not confirmed, but all evidence points toward an unusual relationship that may have shaped her trajectory. Whether it was favoritism, romance, or strategic alignment, Deborah Cox's rise to fame was not a simple story of talent and timing. It was complex, maybe scandalous, and, to this day, largely unexplained.